Hi, my project is on the sexual assault and abuse migrant women face in both in ICE custody and on the border. So, to start off, what is the problem? Women and migrant children are being sexually assaulted and abused while crossing the border and in ICE custody. At first, when approaching this question, I wrote, there is an alarmingly large number of migrant women and children being sexually assaulted and abused. However, something about the framework of that sentence deeply disturbed me. And upon taking a closer look, I realized that my sentence was representative of the rape culture and gaslighting many of these women are subject to in the aftermath of the initial abuse, which is also a problem I need to address within this assignment. It is true, the sheer amount of women and children who are currently dealing with this abuse is both disgusting and astounding, and the large numbers of this occurring is probably what attracted me to this project in the first place. However, the call to action to remedy this problem shouldn't be to lower the numbers of women and children being survivors of this. It should be to eliminate the category altogether and perhaps abolish ICE and several other racist, capitalist American institutions that force, allow, and turn a blind eye to this abuse. So, what is the problem? The problem is that rape culture is transnational and that it doesn't only occur in America, in politicians' speeches on the sexual abuse these women endure, or in American articles regarding the issue. Rape culture is everywhere, and it's in Montclair University, my hometown of Edison, New Jersey, and the countries these women migrate from. I chose to focus on Mexican women for this project specifically, as with Trump's comments about all Mexicans being rapists, it felt important to me to unpack his comment in the context of the sexual abuse Mexican women endure at the hands of American men, and specifically Border Patrol agents. I chose to focus on Mexican and Honduran women for this project specifically, as with Trump's comments about all Mexicans being rapists, it felt important to me to unpack his comment in the context of the sexual abuse Mexican and Honduran women face at the hands of American men and specifically Border Patrol agents. However, I don't want to get ahead of myself in approaching this topic, so I will conclude the first section of my project with a testimony by a Honduran woman who was assaulted on the border. When J.E. was 14 years old, along with 3 other migrants, she was kidnapped in South Texas by a Border Patrol agent. He raped her in his apartment in Mission, Texas. As reported by the New York Times article, "You have to pay with your body," she says, "He took me and tied me up to a tree. He said he would come back. I was thinking about my little brother, who's in Honduras, and if I'd ever see him again. He was about 10, I think. It was hours." She goes on to describe what happened to her when he came back. "My mind was blank. I was trying to understand everything. I didn't know what to do. My feet were tied up. I would look up at him and he had a gun, and that frightened me. I asked him why, and he answered me that he was doing this to me because I was the prettiest one of the 3. So there's a couple things that I want to unpack here. The fact that it's a Border Patrol agent who's quite obviously a grown man in a great position of power against a 14-year-old girl who is a migrant. And then the fact that he's raping her because she's beautiful, as if it's both a compliment and her fault. This speaks to both the rape culture and power imbalance between these vulnerable migrant women and officials. This is a good segue for the next subsection of my project, which addresses rape culture and power further. So, why does this problem exist? In this portion of the video, I will address why this problem exists. I will answer this question in 2 segments as it is a lot to unpack. The segments are, why are migrant women being raped in this process and why is no one doing anything about it? In my researching of rape culture, I've been very aware of the impact of the framework of sentences and the intent behind sentences like the one I said above. So instead of saying, why are migrant women being raped in the process, I want to say, why are Border Patrol agents, smugglers, and men raping these women? I deeply struggle to answer this question because I still haven't discovered why men hurt women and then silence them from ever speaking out. I think this problem is allowed to exist because of power. These women who are crossing the border are in extremely vulnerable positions. As stated in the New York Times report on sexual assault and border crossings titled, "You Have to Pay with Your Body," Undocumented women and children are the most unprotected of human beings. These women are leaving their home countries due to gang violence, violence in their own community, and exploitation in the form of human trafficking. As reported by Amnesty USA's article Fleeing for Our Lives, studies show that 82% of migrant women indicated that if returned to their home country, they would likely face torture or persecution. So these women are in incredibly vulnerable positions as they are seeking asylum from danger in their home countries. So when male guards masturbate in front of women or force them into sexual activities, a majority of women do not report the assault, as they fear, and rightfully fear, that it will affect their deportation status. Or if this is occurring on the border, they fear that if they report it, their attackers will reveal their immigration status and cause them to be deported or worse. As reported by the New York Times article, You Have to Pay with Your Body, one woman was raped repeatedly at gunpoint in a stash house in Phoenix in 2005, and she said her attacker threatened to sell her 3-year-old daughter if she reported him. Additionally, rape culture also prevents these women from speaking out. And ICE policy enables these guards to exploit these women, as ICE operates just like the carceral system. It is for profit. Many say that these facilities are not being properly overseen or investigated, and this leaves room for abuse as well. For example, ICE policy mandates that detainees must be transferred with one guard of the same sex. This means that migrant women or detained women cannot be in cars alone with male ICE agents. However, T. Don Hutto Residential Detention Center in Texas violated that order 77 times in less than a year, allowing male guards to transfer women alone. Hutto is also the site where horrifying rape and abuse has occurred, many women coming forth hesitantly with testimonies regarding their treatment. So, to wrap this portion of the video up, this problem exists because ICE allows its agents to exploit migrant women without consequence, and these women are in incredibly vulnerable states in terms of legal status, so they cannot defend or protect themselves. Additionally, these women are vulnerable because they are seeking asylum from countries where they have already faced horrifying sexual abuse and exploitation. Why is it critical that we understand? It's critical that we understand why this problem occurs, because the stories of these women and the horrifying violence that has been done to them will keep getting swept under the rug if we don't. There are so many misconceptions about migrant women in ICE, and clarity regarding the state of ICE, immigration, and migrant women is important. Trump recently made a statement saying that America needs to build a wall between itself and Mexico in order to prevent migrant women being abused and raped at the border. Statements like this are horrifyingly manipulative. As stated by the article, Trump builds support for border wall on the backs of women by Rebecca Hughes and Catherine Powell. Trump is not seeking to convey facts. Instead, he is selectively tapping into concerns about women's rights to build support for his wall. In doing so, he has tethered human trafficking, one of the few remaining bipartisan issues, to the administration's most polarizing policy. This strategy risks fueling misconceptions about human trafficking and hindering efforts to eradicate it. So, in other words, Trump is using the fact that these women are seeking asylum against them, saying that the best way to protect Americans from the violence these women face is through a wall, which intends to keep these vulnerable women from seeking safety in America. Additionally, as reported by the New York Times, You Have to Pay with Your Body, much of the violence that occurs to migrant women occurs in the United States itself and not on the border. So a statement and intended political policies backing a statement are both inaccurate and dangerous. In fact, migrant women are faced with this danger largely due to the Trump administration's immigration policies currently. Due to the heightened presence at the border and Trump's overall zero-tolerance policy, migrant women have been forced to turn to smugglers to use smuggling routes that are more dangerous and costly. It is critical that we truly understand the sexual violence and abuse Mexican and Honduran women face in order to eradicate abuse rather than exacerbating it, as misinformation often does. So, In this portion of my project, I will address two questions together. Who are the players and what is the story or history of this problem so far? There is a long pattern of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse inflicted by Customs and Border Protection officials that existed long before Trump's zero-tolerance policy. In 2005, the Department of Justice and Homeland Security created Operation Streamline, a program to mass prosecute migrants en masse for crossing the border. By 2008, immigrant prosecutions took up half the federal criminal docket, which created a culture of criminalization of migrants and xenophobia. Under the Obama administration, there were great accounts of sexual assault and abuse in ICE detention and in crossing the border. In researching sexual abuse and assault faced by Mexican Honduran women under the Obama administration, I found shockingly similar accounts as Trump's, and ineffective policies, accountability, and justice being served to these women. Currently, Trump's zero-tolerance policy focuses more on immigration prosecutions than deportations. This means that Customs and Border Patrol officials will separate migrant parents with their children, sending the parents to jail and leaving the children in the custody of immigration agencies. In the custody of immigration agencies, young migrant children are incredibly vulnerable to sexual assault and abuse, staff often engaging inappropriately with children. Many of the testimonies I've read are from Honduran teenage girls who escaped horrifying environments of rape culture in their home countries to come to America and be subject to exactly the same culture of abuse and neglect. What are the cultural currents and contexts in which this problem operates and endures? ICE and Border Patrol policies are directly linked to mass incarceration. As reported by Immigration Detention and Mass Incarceration by Decarcerate PA, almost half of immigrant detainees are being held in private facilities in 2012. These private facilities are profit for prison companies, which means that like other private prisons, ICE detention directly funds the pockets of corporations and companies. These prison corporations have invested huge amounts of money into lobbying for anti-immigrant bills, like Arizona SB 1070, that have facilitated prison expansion. So basically, the rate of migrant women being criminalized for crossing the border and their state of safety ties directly into mass incarceration. Due to the push for detention centers and prosecution, these women are placed in the prison system, which is a system that enables sexual abuse in and of itself. According to a survey conducted by the federal government's Bureau of Justice Statistics, in a single year, 2011 to 2012, about 100,000 people locked up in U.S. prisons and jails experienced sexual victimization. Staff members perpetrated more than half of these attacks. Just like ICE detention centers and Border Patrol, the prison industry has a horrible history of sexual assault and abuse against women. Inmates, just like detained migrant women, are often exploited for their vulnerability by officials, and victims are not able to protect themselves, nor does the system encourage them to report the assaults. I would like to conclude this portion of my assignment with a quote from a prison rights attorney, Maura Meltzer-Cohen, which connects sexual abuse migrant women face under ICE to the sexual abuse incarcerated women face in America. The very nature of the institution involves a captive group, enormous disparities in power between prisoners and among prisoners, and almost zero oversight or accountability. You could not design a better factory for unchecked abuses of power. Given what you know, what are your projections for the future? Given what I know, it seems that the government, both Democrat and Republican, will commit egregious acts against these women by allowing these facilities to remain open and the culture of sexual assault to remain rampant. There is a lot of misinformation regarding immigration, largely due to the xenophobia migrant women face and the state of sexual assault and abuse against migrant women in ICE custody and on the border wall will only increase with the creation of Trump's border wall. As I've stated earlier, these women are fleeing dangerous countries and looking to seek shelter. Honduras is one of the most dangerous countries for women, with its sexual assault rates being incredibly high. Migrant women will try to come to America regardless of if there is a wall or not a wall. If there is no intervention to solve this problem, rates of sexual assault and abuse against migrant women will only increase. Immigrants seeking asylum will come to America regardless, and with stricter immigration methods, women will have to use more dangerous methods of getting here. This means that they will be more vulnerable to sexual violence than they were before.